Hey.
Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Bunch of head nods. That's good enough. Welcome
good.
to March 9th.
It's Wednesday.
This is our Kubernetes. Yeah, yeah. Let's see. We got 2 items on the agenda. Henry, how about you go first? If you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So I don't have anything to really demo yet, but wanted to give a short update on where we are with Redis right now. So I merged most of the things that you created in your branch, Skarbek, into master now. There will be one more AMER coming, and this gives us the scripting to be able to test the switch to using DNS names on the VMs. And that should work on parameterized clusters and nodes and hosts. So we can use this also later in the same form for doing the real switchover, maybe with some rework. And what I'm doing now is testing exactly this procedure, see if I see any flaws or improvements that I can do there, and then see if we can get to a state where we want to maybe try this in pre even. But we need to see how comfortable we feel with that. So that's where we are with this right now.
Do you have some issues, Henry, you could share? Like what was the issue
with
the
1550? One moment. Put this in. Oh, that's the right doc here. So this is for enabling the node names.
This one, Liam, just for a little context, was what we were talking about this morning. So we'll need, as we do the switch over, we'll need to be able to run over VMs and Kubernetes to allow the deployment. So this was kind of one of those blocking pieces.
Perfect, makes sense.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to report. If there are no other questions.
Oh, I have another question.
Yes.
So you mentioned we may not be far away from pre. So like what's the what is our kind of current status, and like are we able to test on pre, or do we have other things we want to get in place first?
I want to test this procedure in our sandbox cluster first to be really sure that it works, right? To find all flaws, possible flaws, and base, what could go wrong. And once we feel comfortable with that, I hope there's not much missing for that, we should see how we can do the same in pre, right? Applying those scripts on pre, which should switch over the rate limit VMs over to using DNS names.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so we want to make the change on pre on the existing VMs, and that will set us up ready to later on. Okay.
Yeah. So this is testing if our automation so far is sane enough and working so that we can use it in production. Also, what we need to test is to try this running with some load, like something which is doing requests, and so we see if we fail or how much we fail by doing this. The switch over, because it involves doing failovers and switching configurations, resetting Sentinel. So we need to see how much requests we might lose in between, maybe. So this is what we need to test here.
That's effectively where I dropped off. Like one of my notes and one issue that's assigned to me was like, I would like to get the benchmark process of that environment running again, and performing the failover as the benchmark is running to see, what's the failure rate of those requests. So that all makes sense.
Is that comment on the same issue, Skarbek, or on a different?
Yeah, I think Skarbek had this noted as next steps in one of his last comments in this issue.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, great. Would you mind, Henry, like if you're taking this over, would you mind updating the assignee and adding a comment and just kind of making sure that we help Igor when they come back next week to sort of catch up?
Yeah, we'll do that. So Skarbek, I'm taking this officially over now from you. Okay.
I'm not sure. Was there a fight there? It didn't look like much fight.
Happy to give it away at this moment. Anything else before I begin? Okay, so metrics inside of Prometheus. I don't have a formalized discussion, so I'm just going to try to explain what I've been looking at recently so that all of us could just be aware. And then maybe if anyone has ideas or thoughts, brain dump it on me. So I'll share my screen because I don't really have a good way to present this without fumbling over my own words. So a little while ago, we started to see more and more issues where when production is ready to be deployed, or if someone is doing a feature flag change, and we run a simple Prometheus query to determine whether or not our services are healthy. And you can see from the screenshots that Amy provided, the main stage of Sidekick was not healthy during one run. And apparently 2 minutes later, someone ran the same command and Sidekick isn't here at all. And our Git stage went unhealthy. So I started looking into this because this is rather concerning. We don't want this to happen, obviously. We do have active work happening on our metrics from the scalability side of things. So, maybe something digressed and, made things worse or what have you. So I started looking into this. And one of the things we noticed was that our metrics had holes in them, which is not good. And this is a metric. So this is the actual metric that we use. It's called GitLab Deployment Health Service. And we've got one for AppDex and one for errors. We mash those two together. And if we get a value of 1, things are healthy. If we get a value of 0, things are not healthy. And we've got this very complicated, I drew up a chart that does this. Prometheus doesn't provide an easy mechanism to do this. So there's actually some complicated logic. So I'm going to save that for outside of this conversation. But effectively, we're looking at the service ratio for 1 hour, for 5 minutes, for 6 hours and 30 minutes, and we combine them two. And if we're good, we actually have a value of 0 and we flip it to 1. If we have a value of 1, we flip it to 0 and vice versa. To determine if a given service is healthy or not. The problem is that these metrics, so GitLab service errors with the ratio of 6 hours and 1 hour, are quite holy for some reason. There's no metric showing up. If we decompose what those metrics are consisting of, we do see them dip for various services. They do occasionally dip to a value of 0 and back up to 1. So the fact that we get missing metrics is a little problematic. So when looking into this, I think I found somewhere that metrics are missing. So I thought one of the things I could do with this was let's just get rid of the metrics that are missing. And Andrew is against doing this. So because this picks up errors that are occurring over the course of the lifetime of a given service. And even though it's a 6-hour window, it's looking at the errors over the course of history. So if errors are increasing over the course of 6 hours, there could be some other inherent issue that just doesn't show up within a short time span of an hour. So it's wise to keep this metric in place. Therefore, we're trying to capture everything all encompassing in a given deployment package. So we don't want to remove this because this is important to us. what we found our investigation was obviously that, metrics are holy, but we're getting timeouts. Metrics are simply not being somewhere in here. Goodness, where is it at? Okay, fine. Screw it. Can't find it quickly. Some of our metrics, we get a lot of metrics out of Sidekick, for example. And one of the things that I was concerned with was the sheer number of metrics that Sidekick produces is extravagant. So if I just do this one metric is simply called the completion seconds bucket. This is what feeds into the AppDex, for example. And this is already taking a really long time to render me the amount of metrics that we produce. So much so that, Thanos is crashing on my machine. But we got over 8,000 metrics returned for just this one metric alone. So the cardinality for this one metric is extraordinarily high. Now, that's one metric for this one pod. Yesterday, when I was looking at this issue, at the time I was looking at it, we had over 570 pods running in production. So for this one metric alone, for every single pod, we've got 500 times 8,000 metrics. That's quite a lot. And I think the problem that we're suffering from is when we try to query Prometheus and try to build our metrics, Thanos ruler needs to reach out to Prometheus to be able to create the metric, the recording rule that records the data that we want. And we're just running into situations where Prometheus is timing out. So I found, I didn't screenshot, that's why I can't find it, but I think it's this one. So Prometheus has built-in timeouts, and we're simply timing out, querying this extravagant large amount of metrics overall. And this is kind of evaluating rule failed, query timeout. And this is happening for all of our Prometheuses inside of Kubernetes in production today. So this is not really a small problem. This is kind of a large problem because this is going to impact quite a few things. This bubbles all the way up back to our reporting metrics that we use for determining how healthy services are over the course of lengthy periods of time. So like looking at a month overview, for example. So if we're trying to find out our SLIs and SLOs and report those to the public, we might not have all the data necessary to record accurate metrics for that information. Being that those are business metrics, it might be wise that we try to fix that as soon as possible. So metric timeouts are a problem. The fact that this one metric alone is giving us 8,000 different values is kind of problematic. I think I calculated that Sidekick outputs over 10,000 metrics per pod, which is excruciatingly large. So like I mentioned before, scalability is already working on metrics as a whole for other various aspects, but one of the things that we're considering is lowering the amount of buckets that we use that capture the completion times for various workers, as well as the buckets that we use for capturing database related metrics for Redis and Postgres as well. So shrinking metrics will certainly help us. I guess the question I have for anyone on this call, because I don't know how to look into this appropriately, are there other things that we could potentially look at in doing that doesn't involve touching metrics, because that's already being worked on and hopefully we can be successful in that realm. But we also have Prometheus, where we've got one Prometheus per cluster. I ponder if we need to split out these Prometheus deployments into many, and then have those Prometheus target specific items. So we might have Prometheus dedicated to Sidekick, or we might have Prometheus dedicated to specific shards of Sidekick. Or maybe more simplistic, we have Prometheus dedicated to GitLab, and then we have another Prometheus dedicated to everything else. I'm looking at other ways that we might want to start thinking about how to alleviate this problem. Because I don't see this going away. In fact, I see this getting worse over the course of time because GitLab is only going to grow Prometheus has already been a source of contention. You know, we occasionally run into problems with WAL files, and we need to completely bash and restart Prometheus and delete all of its data. So we have to rely on the redundant node to provide us those metrics so that we don't lose any. I don't know. Open question. I don't know if I covered the topic very well, but you know, feedback or questions.
Just before we jump into kind of ideas, like you definitely covered, I think some of it super well. Like, could you just give us a brief overview of the reliability issue? And I know you mentioned that was a blocker. So like, what is kind of that piece that we also need to have?
So that's the thing that I'm looking into right now. This is a blocker for me because I don't know of another good way to fix the problem for team delivery. I think our metrics is where we source all of this information. So if we try to build some mechanism inside of release tools that says, ignore the metric if it's empty, is a very dangerous thing to be accomplishing. If we tell release tools, hey, this metric is missing, even though it should be here, we're not fixing the problem. We're just exposing the problem that we already know very much is a problem currently today. So like, I don't know what else to do from that front. So I thought, let's dive into our metrics and figure out what's going on there. So this is the problem that we're trying to fix and solve.
Right.
Yeah.
I think this is a really complex topic.
Yes.
For one, I mean, it needs to be fixed at the root because the whole engineering is depending on working metrics, right? So we need to find a solution to overloading our Prometheus or Thanos instances with too many metrics or too high cardinality. One approach I saw in the issue mentioned was that there's an epic for splitting up Prometheus and Kubernetes, as you mentioned, for maybe having specific Prometheus for different components, maybe, or something like that. So there's an epic for this already, but I guess there's some work to be accomplished. As an immediate solution or patch just for us, the only thing I could think of is that we try to come up with some recording rule, which is trying to, you know, piece together the metrics that are mostly working and leaves out what has gaps maybe. But then we wouldn't have a coverage for a sidekick. But maybe we could find a replacement query or recording rule for this one, which makes it, you know, not as heavy and thus working. So this would be patching around the current problem. So we would have our own recorded metric for saying this service is healthy, which could lean on what we have already, where it's working, and replacing the metrics with gaps with something which is, you know, not as heavy maybe. But this would also be some work, and it's just a patch around a recurring problem, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if there are many other options for this one.
So I guess like in terms of, I mean, like, thanks for sharing that epic, Henry. Like, are we in agreement that that is the sort of like the proper solution?
I don't know if it's the proper solution. It's one idea that we have that could probably help us out here. Like our Prometheus right now is just overloaded. You know, it's consuming an enormous amount of RAM. It's consuming an enormous amount of CPU. For some of our zonal clusters, we have nodes dedicated to run only Prometheus and effectively nothing else. So it's not even a good use of Kubernetes itself. Like realistically, those should be its own virtual machines. But that aside, you know, splitting Prometheus up would be beneficial because then we're delegating that workload to many Prometheus, and then we could distribute what we're recording and what we're saving from those more effectively.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of work to make that happen. Like that's not going to be oh, let's just deploy it and we're done. That's not a one-day thing. That's going to be a multi-week, multi-month project to get it going, reconfigure things, make sure we didn't break anything, etc. Like it's not a quick solution is my concern.
Mm-hmm.
We could iterate towards it, but again, even that process is going to take a long time and it's not going to solve our immediate problem, which is metrics are missing currently.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And the idea you suggested, Henry, like what's you reckon in terms of like rough size for that?
It's hard to say. I mean, that just came to my mind. But this would just involve getting deep into our rule set that we have for Prometheus and figuring out how we can set up our own recording rule, which then would need to just leave out some parts which are not fully reliably working and trying to find replacement queries for those which are working and patching this together. So that would be, I mean, just working on those recording rules. So we need some knowledge about how this all stiff together and working, because this is some complex generated JSON stuff that we are dealing with. But maybe we can just make a easier manual patch around this instead of trying to, auto-generate a lot of stuff here. Could work. That would be a good discussion, maybe with people like Andrew or maybe Igor, or who else is deep into our recording rules. You could look into that.
I would probably prefer, like, if it sounds like weeks to months for us to do that. Like,
I don't think so. I think it's not weeks and months. It's just spending a few days, maybe looking deeply into our recording rules. But this is just working on some kind of code on our Prometheus PROML expressions there. And I think that would be work that we can just say, okay, we try for 3 days to get this fixed this way. And if not, just stop here. But it shouldn't take much longer, I think.
I think there's 3 facets to your ideas. One, all of this is very heavily abstracted inside of JSON. So there's the need to have the knowledge of how this is put together. So we need to heavily rely on persons like Andrew or Bob that have been heavily, deeply involved in this to help build the appropriate query. The second aspect is we need to figure out what we would use for that replacement query, or what we could supplement our recording rule with, such that we fill those gaps in appropriately. And for that, I don't know what we would use just yet, whether it's just us continuing on the data and just filling that gap in with whatever that value was previously, which could be incorrect information, or finding some supplemental value instead. And then third is the business impact to all of this. Like, I don't know what else uses these metrics. I didn't know that feature flag changes were using these metrics. I thought it was just our own delivery tooling. Like, I thought these metrics were built specifically for delivery and no one else. So learning that this is used elsewhere has me a bit nervous that if other people are relying on these metrics, whatever solution we choose with Henry's idea, we need to make sure that we clearly advertise that, hey, these metrics may not be correct because of X, Y, and Z for the moment until we have a better permanent solution. And then if we implement said solution, I guess a fourth facet to this idea is I want to make sure that we don't leave that patch in place for long. Because I don't want to be giving people incorrect information, and I want to make sure that we're going to at least get towards a final solution in the long run, which would probably try to involve that epic that Henry mentioned earlier.
I don't think we need to patch the current recording rule. We can just leave it in place. So it's working in dashboards.
We would record a new recording rule.
Yeah. So we just need to make sure that who wants to use it knows that this is kind of incomplete and patching around some problem. But I guess if we name it accordingly, not too many people would try to use it right.
GitLab deployment health patch.
Yeah, something like that.
But then I have a question, like, regards the recording rule. It wouldn't be real time, would it? Like, we actually, it would give us like a hint that the system is up or down, but not in real time, correct?
Yes, but we are totally rely on recording rules already. So everything we are relying on is based on recording rules mostly. Yeah. And it's a high, several layers of abstraction in JSON that generating these. And I think only Andrew is the person who is really understanding what it is.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. For now, given that it's great we have an option I would rather not have to patch something specifically for delivery if we can. Let me go off and see what we can do. Like, it sounds like this one is a cross-department effort. It's gonna, like, something will come out. But let me see what we can actually pull together and figure out so that we can actually get an idea of what is going to be the real fix that goes in for this, and when can we maybe sort of expect that or contribute to that. And then once we know a bit more, maybe we make a plan for whether we want to actually, like you say, Henry, like time box a few days and see if we can actually put something up for delivery.
So one of the items that Bob proposed reduces the amount of metrics we have by a certain amount. I don't know how to evaluate how significant that proposal has until after it's done, unfortunately. And this is just due to my lack of knowledge with Prometheus in this particular case. I would love to see, if we accept that proposal, I would love to see what kind of impact that has. Because if we could reduce any metrics that we have, I think that'll be beneficial to us. So I would love to see us try to see that through first, if possible, and
Yeah,
then
that
maybe
makes
pick
sense.
up Henry's idea afterwards, potentially.
I agree. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think in this one, Scarlett, when you say we, like let's all remember that's infrastructure. Like, this is so like Bob is actively working on this proposal for reducing so it's in the improvements for error budgets, reducing the number of metrics we're capturing. I see Steve's commenting on the epic Henry shared about on 623 about the options there. So there's a lot of people talking about this and sort of thinking about this. So I think let's see how we can coordinate a bit of a plan to actually fix the problem.
I have one question. How much is this blocking us? I guess it's annoying because we see these in our production health checks, right? But it's not saying...
blocking us at all, because actually our current thing is it just totally skips it. So it gives us an extra risk on deployment because we are deploying when something may be unhealthy and not knowing it.
Yeah,
but it doesn't block anything.
I think what we still are able to see, though, is in our dashboards, just going to the dashboard for the service that we see red at this moment and see if it's looking healthy there. That would be a workaround for now to be sure, okay, it's still okay, because there we don't mix all of this together, but we have, you know, the just standard AppDex dashboards over a shorter time range, and those are working normally. And I think the really bad thing is just if you want to automate, right? If you want to promote, if the thing is green, then we would need to rely on that one. And then it would become really blocking. Yeah.
To put a number value to your question, Henry, I've calculated that between 10 and 20% of the time in which you run that query, it's going to return empty data, which is not insignificant.
Yeah, so about one deploy a day. So it might be worth, like, does somebody want to actually just put together like a small thing then, so that like a release manager has like a quick step guide of like, you run this thing, if you're not seeing all of these metrics, go here, look for this, double check before you hit the button.
I could do that.
Awesome.
I'll work on that, because that's a good thing to have.
And then that kind of gets us through like this immediate problem. But yeah, like you say, Henry, like we won't be able to switch to automated promotions. But it sounds like from Scarbeck's kind of initial overview that actually that's the least of our problems on this metrics one right now. So hopefully we'll actually like see a project come together quite quickly. Awesome. Thanks for bringing that one up, Scarbeck, and for the investigation, actually, like super great. It was a much more interesting investigation than I expected from the issue when I opened it.
Okay, well, that's all I had. Any other questions, comments, or fun topics anyone wants to bring up at all? Anything at all?
I think probably two fun topics. So one, I don't know if you've all met Liam. Liam has just joined platform. It was the week before last, right, Liam? I lost track of time. So
Yeah, it's
like-
been nearly 2 weeks now. It's flown by. Yeah, I don't think I have met the majority of the people on the call, actually. I've seen your names lots, of course, around Slack and on GitLab. Yeah, I joined from the manage stage, which I was working with for about 3.5 years. And I felt as if my time there was coming to an end, and it was fun to come over and see what was going on the infrastructure side of the business. So I've joined Scalability, working alongside Rachel to spin up a second team there. So yeah, I'm excited by the challenges that exist over on the infrastructure side, and lots to learn, lots to do, and yeah, lots of opportunities for growth for me and for the company.
Yeah, awesome. Good to have you over here, Liam. And for those of you on Redis, Liam's going to be sort of starting out, getting kind of caught up on the Redis project. So you'll get to know Henry probably first, and then maybe Ahmad as you come off release management in a week or so. You might be able to get more involved there as well.
Okay, look forward to it.
Awesome.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for participating in today's meeting. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Everyone.